Did you know that the rear brakes on an Audi B9 can actually wear quicker than the fronts? Crazy, right? My name's Cole from FCP Euro, and today we're going to show you how to replace the rear brakes on your 2-liter equipped Audi B9. In front of us, we have the brake kit for the B9 chassis with a 1JK brake code. Now we have the Zimmerman rotors and the Techstar pads, and we chose these because they are very high quality, but also budget friendly. Now, if you're looking for a brake kit that is different from what we're using today, head over to fcpeuro.com where you can input your vehicle into our vehicle selector or call technical support and we can help you with all the brakes on your car. Included in the kit is not only the pads and rotors, but all the hardware and brake grease that we're going to need to do this DIY. Here at FCP Euro, we recommend replacing the rear brakes on your B9 2-liter every 30 to 70,000 miles. Now, some signs that your brakes may need to be inspected or replaced can be overall braking performance. How does the pedal feel? Brake pad wear sensor light, grinding, squeaking, some lips on the rotor here, or if the brakes just perform not the way they should. And overall, this isn't a very complicated DIY, so let's get into all the tools that we're going to need to replace the rear brakes. We will need an arrangement of sockets including a 17mm wheel socket, 18mm, 13mm, T30 Torx bit, and an adapter if you have different sizes. We will also need some ratchets in different sizes and torque wrenches ranging from 8 Nm all the way up to 140 Nm. A hammer if your rotor doesn't come off, some brake piston spreading tools, a pry bar, a flathead screwdriver, a 90-degree pick, a wire brush, some safety glasses, some brake cleaner, a scan tool that can retract the rear parking brake. In this case, we're using VCDS today, Q-tips for ease of installation on grease, a wheel hanger, and some good old power tools to speed up the process. Now that we know everything that we're going to need on this table, let's get the DIY started. Now, before working on the brake system, it's always a good idea to grab a flashlight, open this little panel on the hood, and check the brake fluid level. Now, the reason why we're checking that is because if it's too high and we retract the pistons, it can sometimes overflow this bottle and leave brake fluid everywhere. So if it's a little bit on the high side, it's a good idea to grab a little suction pump here. A turkey baster even works. And we can just suck a little bit of fluid out to lower that fluid level before we start working on the system. Be sure not to get brake fluid anywhere because it's highly corrosive and will destroy a bunch of stuff. But once we adjust the level, we're going to put this cap back on and continue with this DIY. However, one thing to note, if you do suck some fluid out, be sure to check the fluid level again after you replace the brakes and top off if necessary. Now, with the ignition on and our hood open, we're going to use a scan tool to start the rear brake pad line change procedure. In this case, we're using VCDS today. Once the application is open, we are going to select the control module to open up some prompts here. Choose ABS and brakes, and then go into the basic settings. Now, once we're in basic settings here, we're going to scroll down to where it says Start Lining Change Mode. Once we're there, we're going to hit this go button. Now you're going to hear the parking brake actuate in the rear, and it's putting it into service position so we can use a brake pad or piston spreader tool to open up that caliper. And when it's done, it'll say finished correctly and not running. Now we can cycle the ignition off and start working on the vehicle. With our vehicle safely lifted in the air, we're going to start removing the lug bolts. If you do not have an impact gun, be sure to break the lug bolts free down on the ground. Now, to remove these plastic covers, you can use the tool that is included in your spare tire kit or a 90-degree pick. So taking this tool, we're just going to come in here and remove all of these beauty covers. Using a 17mm wheel socket, we're going to remove the 5 lug bolts. One tool that we like to use is a wheel hanger to help take the wheel off and put it back on. At this point, we're going to take a pry bar, get right in here, and pry this caliper forward a little bit to help free up and give us a little bit more wiggle room As you can see, we just got a little wiggle room here to remove the caliper. Now, this is a good time to replace the brake pad wear sensor, which on this vehicle is on the passenger side. So we're gonna go over there and show you how to do it. Over on the rear passenger side, to remove the brake pad wear sensor, we're gonna come over here and loosen this little bleeder cap so we can free that wiring. And then we can take a set of needle nose pliers and grab that sensor right there. We can now just come over to this side and release it from the clip here. Note the new sensor does have a hole holder associated with it, so you can choose to remove it or not. I have this caliper partially disassembled, so it's moving around a little bit, but we'll just come over here, release it there. Once it's out of that, we can come up here to the connector itself, grab a 90-degree pick, get right underneath here of this locking tab. Be a little bit tricky. There we go. And then we're gonna rotate this 90 degrees. Now we can slide this upwards and remove the connector from the sensor. As you can see here, my old little spring clip stayed in my caliper. So when you install the new sensor, be sure to remove this if it's still there. Now, the sensor clips into this little slot here on the back caliper. So to install the new sensor, we're going to slide our new caliper on, tighten these bolts, and then we are going to take our new sensor and just start routing it. Plug it in up top here, slide it into this bracket, rotate it 90 degrees. You may have to lift up on that tab a little bit to get it to lock in. There we go. That could be a little tight. As you can see, the new sensor here has a new holder for it. So we can take a little trim popper tool, come underneath of it, remove the old holder, and then we'll just clip this whole new assembly into the hole. Take the end of the sensor, route it over here, clip it into that little groove that we removed it from earlier. You'll feel a positive click, and then just put this cover back on for the bleeder screw. Now, let's hop over to the driver's side and continue this DIY. We're gonna take a 90-degree pick here, or you can depress this tab and remove this connector from the electric motor. With a 17mm open-end wrench and a 13mm socket, we're gonna come down here and counterhold this with a 17 and then come with a 13 and loosen this up. Now, we don't want to fully loosen this bolt because we want to come up top here and do that same exact procedure with the caliper in this place. All right, with those both cracked free, we can remove the bolts completely. We can now remove this caliper and retract the piston. Using a piston spreader tool, in this case we're using a Lyle one, we can come in here and squeeze this lever a couple times and push that piston back into the caliper. We're gonna feel it bottom out, and that means that it is fully retracted. We can now come here and pull these brake pads off the vehicle. Now with our pry bar here, we're gonna pry out these anti-rattle clips. You can also use a flathead screwdriver for this. There's new anti-rattle clips included in the kit, so we can dispose of these. Since we have the caliper here, we can take some brake clean, give it a little spray, come in with a little wire brush, and just give it a good brushing. A clean brake caliper is a happy one. Now we are going to rotate this out of the way, and Audi made a nice little shelf for us, so we're gonna use it to our advantage. Using a 18mm socket, we're gonna come in with a ratchet and loosen these two bolts first and then remove them. A little bit of wiggling of this bracket makes taking these bolts out a little bit easier. All right, we can pull this carrier off now. Now let's start replacing this brake rotor. We're gonna use a little trick here and remove this hanger and reinstall a wheel bolt here. And the reason we're doing that is when we remove this rotor, we may have to use a hammer to break it free from the hub, and we don't want this rotor to land on our feet. With that now in, we can take a T30 socket. As we can see here, this rotor is not coming off all the way, so we're gonna use a little hammer. All right, now we can fully remove this rotor. With the rotor removed, we can see a little bit of surface rust buildup, and we want to get rid of as much of that as possible so the rotor can sit nice and flat across this hub. So we're gonna grab some safety glasses here, and in this case, we're gonna use a hub resurfacing tool. You can find that on our website at fcpro.com, or you can use sandpaper, wire brush, wire wheels to get any of that rust deposits off. Now with our hub all nice and clean, we can take our rotor here and slide it into position. We're going to want to pay attention that the set screw hole lines up to where the threads are. And a good way to indicate that or make it simpler is you can actually look to the next lug hole and make sure that lines up as well. All right, now with this in place, we can take our new set screw included in the kit, thread it in, and tighten this down to 8 Newton meters. Little impact here to speed it up. We want to make sure this is sitting flush, so give it a couple taps on the hub face here, and then we can come back and do our final tightening. You can counter hold this rotor with a flathead screwdriver in between the vanes here, and then come back with your torque wrench and tighten this to 8 Newton meters. We all love that click. Taking our caliper bracket that we removed earlier, we're going to take some brake clean and a wire brush and just clean up all these grooves. One thing that is commonly overlooked is these actual slide pins. Now I'm going to remove one and to show you how they function. And there's just a pin that slides in this carrier bracket here, and there is some grease there. And it's a good time to pull them out, grease them, and reinstall them. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Since we want everything fresh, we're going to wipe the grease off here and use some of the new grease that's included in the kit to lube it all up. Just spread it around. That should be enough. And now we can slide this back into that bracket. And then if you look here, that rubber boot is just going to pop right over. We also want to look to make sure that there's no tears in this, because if there are, we want to replace it. We're just going to repeat that procedure on the other side. Now, one thing to note, these are side specific, because you'll see here that there's not a bushing on this one, but there was a bushing on the other one. So try not to mix those up. A little lubrication goes a long way. All right, these feel nice and free now. So we're going to install this bracket back onto the vehicle. So taking the new hardware that is included in the kit, we're going to thread these bolts in and then tighten them down to 100 Newton meters and then to 90 degrees of rotation. These are one-time use bolts, so be sure to use new bolts instead of the old ones. We can slide this up out of the way if it's a little bit in our way. Since this is in a tight space, we're going to use the marking method for our rotation. So we're just going to put a line here on our bolt, and then on the hub around 90 degrees of rotation, we're going to put another line. All right, now we're just going to rotate the bolt until our lines match up. We can reinstall these into this caliper bracket. We do want to note that we want to have these as centered as possible, because if they are too biased to one side, they can actually rub on this rotor. So once it's in, give it a little rotate, make sure they're not dragging, and then move on to the other side. We can grab a little bit of lube here that is included in the kit, a little brake grease, and we can apply a little bit on these clips. This is just to keep everything moving nice and smoothly, because the brake pads do move along this channel. Repeat that on all sides of the brake clips. Not too much grease here. We just want to lubricate all of the contact points that the brake pad is going to sit on. Now, taking the brake pad with the little notch here, we're going to install that on the back position. You've got to slide in and then come this way. You know, when you install these correctly, when you release them, they come a little bit out from the rotor, and that's just so they spread a little bit. Taking that front pad here, we are going to do the same. See how there's a little groove here where we want to slide it into that groove, top and bottom, and then push it into the little bracket here. Now, taking our caliper here, making sure that we do not tangle this hose, we're going to take some grease and just put it here, here, and then on that piston. And we're just going to work it in. This just gives us a little barrier so we're not hearing squeaks, rattles of any sort. These pads do come with a anti-rattle plate on it, but we're just doing a little extra layer of protection here. Now, making sure that the brake hose is routed correctly, we're gonna come here, compress these pads a little bit to give us some more room. We also want to make sure that we clear the motor and these pins, and we're gonna slide this caliper back on. With our new hardware that is included in the kit, we're gonna thread it into the slide pins, and then we are gonna come back and tighten them down. Counterholing this again with a 17mm open end wrench and our 13mm socket. We can snug these up and then come back and tighten them down to 35 Nm. We can now come up here and reconnect this electrical connector. We can now hang our wheel back on this wheel hanger here, thread in the 5 17mm lug bolts and snug them up. At this point, we can lower the vehicle down onto the ground, tighten the lug bolts to 140 Nm, reinstall the beauty caps on the lug bolts. We can then go into our scan tool and perform the end procedure of our rear brake pad changing process, pump the brake pedal a couple times, and then bed in the brake pads according to the manufacturer's specifications. And there you have it. Now you too can say you replaced the rear brakes on your B9 Audi. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, drop them in the comments section below. And if you want to see more DIY videos for the B9 chassis and many more, be sure to hit that subscribe button because we have a lot more coming. My name's Cole from FC Puro. Thanks for watching and keep on wrenching.